Stranded one night in snowy Paris with no way to get back home, two friends named Travis Kalanick and Garrett Camp had an epiphany. What if they could request a ride simply by tapping on their phone? This idea was about to turn the entire transport industry on its head. But there was someone in the way: the entire taxi industry of the world. So, how did these two men overcome this massive hurdle and build the fastest growing startup in history? How were they able to gain so much success in such little time? Today, we will tell you a tragic tale of fraud, betrayal, death, and cars as we walk you through the amazing story of Uber's rise to the very top. Uber is one of the most fascinating businesses that have emerged in the last 10 years due to its rapid expansion and ongoing controversies. The international ride-sharing service, established in 2009, revolutionized how we currently travel, and at one point, it reached the status of the most valuable private startup business in the world. On May 9, 2019, Uber went public, 10 years after its creation. Uber announced $1.1 billion in net income, $3.9 billion in sales, and 1.5 billion journeys on its network in 2021. However, things weren't always this way, and the business didn't always make billion-dollar profits. So, where did it all begin, and how did it grow? Let's go back right to the beginning and see where it all started. In 2008, Uber's history began in Paris. At Le Web, an annual digital conference that The Economist defines as where revolutionaries come together to map out the future, two friends, Travis Kalanick and Garrett Camp, were in attendance. Both men had sold the firms they co-founded in 2007 for significant sums of money. While Camp sold StumbleUpon to eBay for $75 million, Kalanick sold Red Swoosh to Akami Technologies for $19 million. One chilly night at the conference, when the two were unable to hail a taxi, the idea for Uber was formed. Uber was created with the thought in mind, what if you could request a ride from your phone? Their original concept was for a timeshare limo service that customers could book through an app. The entrepreneurs parted ways following the summit. Camp, though, remained focused on the concept upon his return to San Francisco and acquired the domain name ubercab.com. While Camp was still the CEO of StumbleUpon in 2009, he started developing an UberCab prototype on the side. By the summer of that year, Camp had convinced Kalanick to accept the position of chief incubator at UberCab. Early in 2010, the service was trialed in New York with just 3 automobiles, and the formal debut occurred in May in San Francisco. In early 2010, Ryan Graves, who had served as general manager of Uber and had been a significant element in the startup's history, was named CEO. When Kalanick became CEO in December 2010, Graves became general manager and senior vice president of global operations. The app's soaring popularity was spurred by how simple and easy it was to request a car. A ride could be requested with the touch of a button, and a GPS would pinpoint the location. The cost would then be charged automatically to the card associated with the user's account. In less than 2 years, in 2011, Uber began worldwide in Paris, where the concept for it first took root. The first ever Uber ride was ordered in 2010. The startup obtained its first significant funding, a $1.25 million round headed by Inaugural Round Capital, after beginning in 2009 and launching its first ride in 2010. 2011 was a significant year for the expansion of Uber. The business expanded to New York, Seattle, Boston, Chicago, and Washington, D.C. early in the year after raising an $11 million Series A fundraising round headed by Benchmark. It also opened an office in Paris. Kalanick said that Uber had received $37 million in Series B funding from Menlo Ventures, Jeff Bezos, and Goldman Sachs in December at the 2011 Le Web conference. The business expanded its selection in 2012 when it introduced UberX. which offered a less-priced hybrid automobile as a substitute for a black car service. After its investment rounds, Uber was valued at $51 billion, making it the most valuable startup in the world as of July 2015. Uber then received an additional $3.5 billion from Saudi Arabia's National Wealth Fund in June of 2016. Uber's quick expansion brought with it a lot of controversy. Uber disclosed its financial situation to Bloomberg for the first time in April 2017, and it revealed that it lost $3.8 billion globally in 2016. The company's valuation had fallen from a high $68 billion to $48 billion by the following year. The largest first-day dollar loss in American IPO history was recorded with Uber's IPO. IPO, or initial public offering, is when a company offers shares of stock to the public. Wall Street analysts had estimated Uber to be worth $120 billion, which would have made it the most valuable firm to ever list on the stock market. The Japanese corporation SoftBank Consortium and a group of investors led by Dragoneer Investment Group successfully bid for 20% of Uber's equity in 2018. The agreement allegedly granted SoftBank 15% of the rideshare company, while giving Uber a strong ally in Asia who may be able to help the company recover from a string of extremely public blunders. But what were these blunders between 2016 and 2018, and how did they impact the company? Numerous public declarations and business pushes made Uber's misogynistic culture very clear. Travis Kalanick was questioned about the celebrity the business afforded him as a bachelor. In a GQ story in 2014, he made light of Uber's nickname, Boober. In October of that same year, Uber's office in Lyon, France, started a campaign to connect customers with hot female drivers. The stunt was swiftly abandoned by the corporation. After a driver who had been charged with raping a passenger appeared in court in December, the app was subsequently banned from the Delhi region of India. Other difficulties within this time period were also noticeable, such as the deadly collision involving an Uber self-driving car. For this, authorities charged the vehicle's safety driver with criminal negligence, but not the company that developed the technology. Investigators said the car's safety driver, Rafael Vasquez, had been streaming an episode of the television show The Voice at the time. Additionally, the New York City Council decided to halt the issuance of new licenses to ride-hailing companies like Uber and Lyft on August 8, 2018. The reason stated by the council was that they needed more time to assess this newly emerging industry's impact and bring it under a legislative umbrella, so it could be properly regulated, like all other industries. Uber was successfully sued in a class action lawsuit for deceiving customers in 2016. To 25 million riders, the firm gave $28.5 million in payments. Approximately a year later, in February 2017, there was a seismic incident. Software developer Susan Fowler wrote about her departure from the company in a blog post. She relates how her manager had harassed her sexually and how HR had done nothing to stop it. She penned, "I was told by both HR and upper management that even though this was clearly sexual harassment and he was propositioning me, it was this man's first offense, and that they wouldn't feel comfortable giving him anything other than a warning and a stern talking to. Upper management told me that he was a high performer, and they wouldn't feel comfortable pushing him for what was probably just an innocent mistake on his part." Numerous demands for reform were made within the business and across Silicon Valley as a whole in response to the blog post. A follow-up article about Uber's terrible workplace culture was published by Mike Isaac in The Times, not long after Fowler's essay. Isaac summarizes some of the more heinous acts as follows. One Uber manager groped female coworkers' breasts at a company retreat in Las Vegas. A director shouted a homophobic slur at a subordinate during a heated confrontation in a meeting. Another manager threatened to beat an underperforming employee's head in with a baseball bat. Scandals in the months that followed appeared to follow the business and its CEO. Eventually, Travis Kalanick left the business as a result of the calls for change. However, not before a number of further Uber execs quit their jobs or departed the firm in shame. Additionally, after an internal inquiry into the company's culture, 215 accusations regarding wrongdoing in the workplace led to the firing of more than 20 people. In June, the medical records of a lady in Delhi, India, that had been raped by an Uber driver were obtained by Eric Alexander, who was in charge of the company's Asian operations at the time. Isaac claimed that Alexander traveled with the woman's paperwork. The corporation wanted to tarnish the woman by using the records. The rape incident resulted in a worst-case scenario for Uber in the national capital. The Delhi government banned its services, and it took 7 months and an intervention from the Delhi High Court for Uber cabs to be back on the roads. In the aftermath of the Delhi rape case, the new safety features the company introduced, including the panic button in every cab, are still not in place. A 2013 email from Kalanick to his staff served as a manual for anyone looking to engage in sexual activity while on a business trip to Miami. The now famous Miami letter was published by Recode in the same month. He stated, "Do not have sex with another employee, unless A, you have asked that person for that privilege and they have responded with an emphatic yes, I will have sex with you, and B, the 2 or more of you do not work in the same chain of command. Yes, that means that Travis will be celibate on this trip." #CEO Life, #FML. Kalanick left his position as CEO after facing pressure from investors. Recode compared the company's atmosphere at the time to a pretty poisonous goat rodeo. After a shareholder uprising, Kalanick resigned on June 21, 2017. It was reported that Dara Khosrowshahi, who was Expedia's CEO at the time, would take over after a little more than 2 months. Khosrowshahi and his parents fled the Iranian Revolution in 1978 by traveling to New York. He began his career in finance at an investment bank, rose through the ranks to become IAC and CFO at Interactive Core, where he spent 7 years, and then was named Expedia's CEO. As of October 2022, Dara Khosrowshahi continues to lead Uber as CEO. Uber has encountered ferocious opposition from the taxi industry and government officials during its expansion. The business employed David Plouffe, a well-known political and business strategist who worked on Obama's 2008 presidential campaign, as part of its plan to lessen the resistance. Based on market supply and demand, Uber set its prices using an automated algorithm. Prices increased by as much as 7 times on New Year's Eve 2011, which fueled user complaints. Indignation over surge pricing peaked again in December 2013, when New York was hit by a snowstorm. Uber recently made the commitment to curb surge pricing during a number of blizzards in New York City. Taxi drivers protested against Uber in force in 2014 in London, Berlin, Paris, and Madrid. Uber has been criticized by the taxi industry for unfair competition, for avoiding paying expensive licensing fees, and following local regulations. The Supreme Court of Europe heard the case in November 2016. In September 2017, Uber's operating permit in London, where it had 40,000 drivers registered, was revoked. On June 26, 2018, a judge in London overturned the prohibition, thus granting Uber a 15-month license with restrictions. Uber was given a fresh license to run in London in September 2020. The present license was valid for 18 months. It was discovered in New York that Uber had wrongly charged drivers commissions based on pre-tax earnings rather than after-tax earnings, costing New York drivers tens of millions of dollars. The business said it was an accounting oversight and vowed to pay the drivers back in full as soon as possible. The problem does make one wonder if it is fair who pays the taxes in the end. The New York Times uncovered evidence to substantiate the claims made by driver advocacy groups that Uber was evading taxes at the expense of its drivers. According to the article, drivers may have been forced to pay hundreds of millions of dollars. A New York judge decided that, at least in some circumstances, Uber drivers should be treated as employees rather than independent contractors. Drivers may now be eligible for employee benefits, which would probably significantly affect the bottom line. Following the introduction of license limits by the New York City Council, Uber suffered a setback and had to wait a full year before applying for any new licenses in the city. In the meantime, Proposition 22 in California was approved at the state's election in November 2020, enabling businesses like Uber to classify their employees as independent contractors rather than full-time employees for the purpose of the gig economy. With almost $200 million spent on its campaign, the ballot measure supported by Uber is officially the most expensive in California history. In April 2021, an arbitrator ordered Uber to pay Lisa Irving, a blind passenger, $1.1 million. The arbitrator determined that Irving had been subjected to discrimination by Uber drivers, who either refused to provide her trips or repeatedly abused her verbally. Uber had contended that because the drivers were independent contractors, it was not liable for their behavior. The rivalry between Uber and its main rival Lyft has been fierce. Both Uber and Lyft alleged that drivers and staff members were sabotaging one another's businesses in 2014 by repeatedly hailing and canceling rides on their respective services. In a Vanity Fair article, Kalanick also blatantly acknowledged that he had attempted to sabotage Lyft's financing attempts. There's not a blanket answer to the question of whether Uber or Lyft is cheaper. The prices of both services can vary according to factors like location and surge pricing. The best way to determine which ride service would be cheaper for you would be to check both apps for their current prices when you need a ride. Even though Lyft has been Uber's biggest competitor since its inception, Uber still remains firmly on top, at least in the US. The breakdown of 2022 sales between Uber and Lyft reveals that Uber still dominates, taking in 72% of US rideshare spending. Uber operates a meal delivery service for businesses named Uber Eats. Uber previously had a service called Uber Pool that was less expensive than UberX and Uber Black because it permitted drivers to pick up numerous passengers during a single booked ride. However, the service has been temporarily discontinued in several places, including the United States and Canada, because of the COVID-19 outbreak. Under the name Pool Chance, Uber has been testing a brand new ride-sharing service in Africa. According to Uber, this service is comparable to Uber Pool, but not the same. In 2017, the business launched a co-branded rewards credit card in the United States in collaboration with Barclays. On July 9, 2018, Uber and GV, a division of Alphabet Inc., jointly announced they would invest in Lime, a rental service for electric scooters. An easy-to-use and clean energy-based business model, Lime's lightweight scooters are available for rent in many major cities, and customers leave them on the sidewalk for the next rider. The transaction is a part of a $335 million funding round, and the company is worth $1.1 billion. Through its own app, Uber advertises for Lime, and a separate Lime app is also available for users to find a scooter. Before buying the bike share startup Jump in April 2018 for allegedly close to $200 million, Uber made comparable attempts with the company. In July 2020, Uber announced that it was buying meal delivery service Postmates for $2.65 billion in an all-stock deal. This was another high-profile purchase. The acquisition and the launch of Uber Eats were intentional moves to offset losses from the ride-sharing element of the business, which has been struggling, particularly during the epidemic, as the food delivery industry continued to grow. The purchase of Postmates caused Uber's shares to reach a record high. Uber is a leader in the development of autonomous automobiles, alongside Google, Apple Inc., and Tesla Inc. The journey hasn't been without its challenges, starting with Waymo's lawsuit against Uber in 2018 for allegedly stealing its self-driving technology. In March of 2018, Uber had possibly its greatest setback to date, when a pedestrian was killed by a self-driving car, prompting the company to temporarily halt all testing. Uber said in May 2018 that it would stop testing in Arizona and move elsewhere. Uber's self-driving cars returned to Pittsburgh in July 2018, but business had slowed down. Uber said in December 2020 that it would sell its autonomous vehicle division to Aurora, a San Francisco-based startup founded by the former Waymo lead engineer. Uber formerly held the record for being the most valuable company in the world and revolutionized the way that ride-sharing and transportation are done today. Despite the fact that the COVID-19 outbreak has complicated Uber's ambitions to turn a profit and caused large losses in its ride-hailing business, the company's strategic investments in its food delivery operations, Uber Eats, and its recent victory in California's Proposition 22 are encouraging. Time will tell if Khosrowshahi can increase Uber's valuation to its anticipated $120 billion level, which may happen soon. Have you ever used an Uber? What was your experience like? Let us know in the comments down below. And don't forget to like our video and subscribe to our channel to stay tuned with even more of our content. Till then, goodbye.